Hello everyone, my name is Casper, and in this video I am going to be doing an astrological chart reading for Jordan Peterson. I've been wanting to do Jordan Peterson's chart for a while. I don't know, I just didn't get around to it, but now I am, finally. Jordan Peterson was born June 12th, 1962 at 2:49 a.m. in Edmonton, Canada. And this time is totally confirmed. Astrodianus says so. Astro.com gave this chart a rotten rating of AA, so this is accurate, confirmed time. We know his ascendant, we know his whole chart. We can totally do the full reading, so that is great news. So, the first thing that really stands out with Jordan Peterson's chart is that he has Sun in Gemini. I know it's so cliche and so stereotyped, but it's true. Gemini people love to talk. They talk on and on and on and on, and they usually go on tangents, especially when Jordan Peterson's Mercury is also in Gemini. Someone can have their Sun in Gemini, but if their Mercury is in Taurus or Cancer, they're probably not going to be as talkative. But if their Mercury is in Gemini, and Mercury is domicile in Gemini, then they're going to be much more likely to talk. And so this makes a lot of sense because Jordan Peterson is, well, he can definitely talk. He is a very, if you listen to his speeches, if you listen to him in interviews, he definitely has a lot to say. And it's very interesting, right? Because his ego, right, his sun is in Gemini, and it's being channeled all into Mercury because Mercury rules over Gemini. And so Jordan Peterson has a very mercurial kind of nature, right? Literally mercurial, right? He's changeable, he's adaptive, he's an idea person. I remember watching a video where he was talking about his personality with his wife and his daughter, and he said that ever since he was a young kid, he would always have ideas in his mind. He would always be thinking about something. He would always be reading a book. And again, this is just part of being a Gemini person, right? Gemini is an air sign. It's highly intellectual. You know, Jordan Peterson also has his moon in Libra, which is also an air sign. And, so very smart, right? These people are very quick-minded, high verbal intelligence, usually. Eminem and Lil Wayne have their sun in Libra, and they're rappers, so they're really witty. So his Mercury in his chart is super, super strong. It's the most powerful planet, I think, in his chart, because if you look at his Mercury, it's pretty amazing. It's making so many different aspects to so many different planets. And again, it's the ruler of his sun. So this is kind of his identity. This is his ego. And I think this explains why he goes on tangents. I think it explains why his words are so mystical and so spiritual, and why I'll just go through each of the planets. So first he has Mercury square Jupiter in Pisces. So what does that mean? It means he has a lot to say, right? Because Jupiter is expansive, and if it's a square, it's kind of like forcing it on you. But usually squares between Jupiter are pretty positive, right? It's luck and abundance. So Jordan Peterson can talk on and on and on. Again, just being a Gemini, you talk a lot, but if you have your Mercury square Jupiter, man, you don't know how to stop talking. You have so much to say. You have an endless amount of words. You're always thinking, you're always moving. And it's very interesting because his Jupiter is in Pisces, and Pisces is a very spiritual sign. It's a very religious sign. And Mercury in Gemini is very logical, not logical, but very conversational. Someone who uses a lot of words, right? Very verbal. So if you have a square between Gemini and Pisces, these people tend to speak in stories, right? They tell a lot of stories, like Jordan Peterson does. He has a story for everything. Like in his interviews, he's always giving stories. He's always like, yeah, I had this one guy, I knew this one guy, man, and he was like, that kind of thing. So, and it has a spiritual element to it because his Jupiter is in Pisces. right? So his words are always flavored with some kind of spiritual essence to it, and it can be expansive and probably a little bit confusing too, right? A lot of people, when they listen to Jordan Peterson, they say, I don't understand what he's saying. He doesn't make any sense to me. And that can happen between a Mercury and Jupiter squares, that these people can talk so big and so broadly that they kind of lose their audience, right? Like the words are just too much, like the symbolism and the spiritual talk is too great. I also forgot to add a few stuff in his chart because there's just so much. So periodically you'll hear these brief clips of me adding stuff in. And so for the first clip, Jordan Peterson, he also has Chiron conjunct his Jupiter, which means Chiron is making a square to Mercury. Chiron is kind of like the healing celestial body. And so if Chiron is making an aspect to Mercury, it means your words can be healing, especially like with Jordan Peterson. He's in self-help and all of that, right? He has a very healing voice, especially when it's conjunct Jupiter, right? Very spiritual, very healing, very therapeutic. Next, he has his Mercury trine Saturn in Aquarius. So Saturn in Aquarius, right? This is great for Saturn. I mean, Jordan Peterson has a great Jupiter because Jupiter is in Pisces. Jupiter is domicile in Pisces. Saturn is domicile in Aquarius. Saturn represents duty, restriction, limitation, and Aquarius represents people, humanity, technology, like humanitarianism. So Jordan Peterson's duties and restrictions are kind of the society as a whole, which is a good thing, right? Because if you have your Saturn in Leo, for example, then you're like restricted in the self. Or in Aries, your self is restricted. But if it's in Aquarius, then it means society is restricted. It means you put a lot of your responsibility and effort towards society. So it's very positive. And again, it's making a trine to his Mercury in Gemini, which means this person can think very logically. This person is very practical. This person is very scientific. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, Jordan Peterson, he is a professor, or he was a professor. He lost his license, which is, I don't know what to say about that. But yeah, I mean, he would do research. So very logical, very structured thinking, which is pretty interesting, right? Like, he has this Mercury square Jupiter, which makes his words kind of go all over the place, but at the same time, it's very structured and it's very scientific and disciplined, and it's for the greater good of humanity. And then moving on, he also has his Mercury making a trine to his moon in Libra. So as I said earlier, people who have like their main planets in air signs tend to be very smart, very verbally fluent. But with this Mercury trine to the moon, it means Jordan Peterson has a beautiful mind. People who have aspects between Mercury and the moon, they just have beautiful minds. It's just something I've noticed. And the reason why, it's because their moon, which is their emotions and their feelings, are connected to their logic, to their words and their logical thinking, right? Because Mercury is like thinking and verbalizing. Moon is how you feel. So these people are intertwined. Their mind and their brain are connected, right? These people have a direct line to how they feel, which is really great for being a therapist, right? Because you can speak what you feel, right? You can feel with your words. Your words have a lot of feeling to them. It also explains why Jordan Peterson is such a great conversationalist. He like when you listen to him in interviews, not only is he very spiritual with that Mercury and Jupiter, and he's very structured with that Mercury and Saturn, but he also feels like someone that you're genuinely talking to. Like he's a real person. Like when you talk to him, right? Because Mercury and Moon people who have Mercury and Moon in aspect, these people really know how to have a conversation. These people genuinely care about what the other person is thinking. They're very they're very motivated and happy to have conversation. So, and then I forgot to mention this, but he also has Mercury square Pluto, which I don't know. I wish I mentioned that. But Mercury square Pluto, Pluto is transformation and intensity and reading between the lines, seeing underground. So Jordan Peterson has a voice that is very provocative, intense, transformational. When he speaks, he says things that are probably a little bit too uncomfortable, that look behind things that no one wants to look behind. And it usually creates some kind of transformation of some kind. So, yeah, Mercury, Pluto people, very strong language, very strong thinkers, people who say things that no one else is really willing to say, pointing things out that no one wants to point out, especially if it's a square. It's not very convenient for everyone else. And it explains everything in his interviews. And again, because his sun is in Gemini, um, right, his ego is channeled into this Mercury, into this communication. And so it's he has a wonderful talent and a wonderful skill for being able to communicate and to speak and to write. And I mean, he writes books, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, even Maps of Meaning, which no one knew about, even after he got popular, I feel like no one really reads it. Maps of Meaning is a great book, and it has, I feel like, anyway. Um, so that Mercury in his chart is very interesting, and his Sun and his Mercury are also in the second house, which means this person has a great skill or a natural strength when it comes to speaking. It can The second house is also the house of money, so this is usually how people make money, right? So Jordan Peterson is literally making money with ideas, with communication, with speaking, with writing. And this is further explained by the fact that he has a Taurus ascendant, right? Let me use my mouse. He has a Taurus ascendant, and his Venus rules over his ascendant, and his Venus is in the third house. And the third house is the house of writing, journalism, communication, again, right? Like Jordan Peterson, it's very interesting because he has a scattered chart. I mean, he literally has a planet in each sign, almost. Like every single planet is kind of on its own. But even though he has that, you can still see that he has a strong mercurial nature to it. He's still an idea person. He's still someone that likes to use words at the end of the day. Like that's his thing, even though his chart is very balanced. So again, his Venus is in the third house, right? Which means he right, like, so the planet ruler of your chart kind of tells you like what your moves towards, like kind of like your place in the world. And so it would be writing. Like I also feel like Peterson would do well as a journalist. Um, but I mean psychology works as well. I mean the thing is, if you're someone who has a planet in each sign, right? Like if you have, I mean, he has his Mars in Taurus, he has his Sun in Mercury and Gemini, he has Venus in Cancer, he has Uranus in Leo, he has Pluto in Virgo, he has Moon. I mean, he literally has a planet in each of the zodiac signs, which is so, it's so interesting and it's so funny, I guess, because usually when you look at people's charts, they usually have planets in a certain area. Um, they're usually, right, like they're really focused in one area of their life. But looking at Jordan Peterson's chart overall, you could say he's a very balanced person, especially with Moon in Libra, which is literally, right, Libra is literally the sign of balance. And if you have Moon there, that means you really feel it on an emotional level on a day-to-day basis. Um, right? Because the Moon is kind of like what someone really is on the inside. The Sun is kind of deceptive, or the Sun is kind of like, this is who the person is, but the Moon is like, this is who they are deep down. And again, they're both in air signs, so Jordan Peterson is an intellectual. he is an intellectual, but with Moon in Libra, he's also deep down an intellectual person, right? Because air sign. And so what else was I gonna say? Very balanced person. He strikes me as someone, and I feel like you can say this about him, like just looking at his life. He's someone who has a really good sense of being balanced, right? Like he's really good at getting his career under control and getting his family under control and his health under control. Like he's someone who really has a balanced way of looking at things. Like he covers all of his bases and he's very good at it. And especially with his moon in Libra, again, Libra is the sign of two people. It's the sign that sees both sides, which is great for therapy and psychology because, especially with that moon aspecting his Mercury, right? His words have emotion in them. He feels his own words. Great conversationalist, great person to have listening to you. Like, you're really lucky if you have Jordan Peterson as a therapist because a lot of therapists, right, they don't have Libra as their zodiac, right? They don't have a Libra sign, right? They don't have planets in Libra or they don't have planets in the seventh house, which the seventh house is the Libran house. So really good. So this has been pretty positive. I mean, is there anything negative? Especially because Jordan Peterson is a controversial figure. Actually, I'll save that towards the end. There's one last thing that I want to touch on before I talk about the negatives. He has a Taurus ascendant, and it's very interesting. Like Taurus and Gemini, like planets within Taurus and Gemini, they have a lot to do with words, ideas, speaking, expressing oneself, because Taurus rules the throat and Gemini rules communication, lungs, and the hands, right? And I think this explains why Jordan Peterson is so expressive, right? Like he uses hand motions, like what I'm doing now. Like he uses a lot of hand motions. He does like this thing or like I don't know. I'm not sure, but he uses a lot of hand motions, and that's how Gemini's are. Gemini's are kind of like they're kind of like spiders or octopuses, where they're kind of like reaching, right? Because again, Gemini and Mercury is the messenger. They're the people that fly all over the place. They want to talk to everyone. They want to communicate everything to everyone. And it's very interesting because if you look at Jordan Peterson now and all of the interviews he's doing, that's exactly what a mercurial person would do. Anyway, he has this Taurus ascendant. I mean, he has Mars in Taurus, he has his ascendant in Taurus, his Mercury in Gemini, his Sun in Gemini, as I've said plenty of times already. They usually are people who have placements here. They tend to be great speakers, great communicators, great singers, something with their voice. Like it's very interesting. Like if you think of like people who have really beautiful voices, they tend to be Tauruses. People who are who can give great speeches, they tend to be Tauruses. People who can talk a lot tend to be Geminis. And you know, a lot of people make fun of Jordan Peterson because of his voice, right? He sounds like Kermit the Frog, right? It's probably because he has placements in Taurus, right? Because Taurus rules the throat, and so if you have planets here, it's basically saying there's something with your throat, there's something with your voice, there's something about your speaking that really pops out. So, what else was I gonna say? So I pretty much covered all of the basics of Jordan Peterson. I feel like the final thing that I want to say that really sticks out and is super, super important. You know, the other thing that I wish I mentioned, and it bugs me so much that I forgot about this, but Jordan Peterson has his ascendant conjunct Algol. You can't see it on the chart, but Algol is a fixed star in astrology, and fixed stars in astrology are actually super important that a lot of people miss or ignore. Fixed stars in astrology can often indicate fame or great wealth or someone who has a lot of prominence, a lot of influence, and a lot of power. And so, right, and there's all kinds of fixed stars. Like, you know, Donald Trump has his ascendant conjunct Regulus, which is a fixed star. Elon Musk has his ascendant conjunct Sirius, which is a fixed star. And Jordan Peterson, he has his ascendant conjunct Algol, again, a fixed star, in Taurus. And Algol is at, I believe, 25, 26 degrees. So Jordan Peterson's ascendant isn't exactly conjunct Algol. Like, it's not super duper close, but it's close enough to give the impression, or you can kind of see like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Jordan Peterson is famous. His ascendant is conjunct Algol. Ascendant conjunct Algol means someone can be wealthy, famous, they can have a lot of power and prominence. But the other thing about Algol, which is something you got to be very careful of, is that it's like the worst fixed star in astrology. It's a very negative fixed star. And it's also associated with the head of Medusa and beheadings, which is a little bit terrifying. But so I don't know. Does that mean Jordan Peterson's like something with his head, like he's going to get beheaded? I don't think so. But it's also associated with alcoholism as well, which is very interesting because, yeah, like a lot of people who have ascendant conjunct Algol tend to be alcoholic, or they struggle a lot with alcoholic addiction, right? Because this fixed star has a lot to do with the head. Like the head is cut off, or the head is messed up, or the head isn't screwed on straight. And so this person has to work really, really hard to keep a good head on their shoulders, basically. It's also pretty interesting too, because Joe Rogan has his ascendant conjunct Algol, exactly conjunct the ascendant, much closer than Jordan Peterson. And I think it's interesting because both Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan are doing podcasts right now. As I said, the Taurus Gemini section of the chart deals a lot with speaking and the voice, like audio stuff. So I think that's really interesting that they're both doing podcasts. They both have a lot of influence, and both of their ascendants are conjunct Algol. This is probably Jordan Peterson's greatest struggle or greatest downfall, or something he really needs to watch out for. And it's that he has Mars and Taurus opposite Neptune and Scorpio. So there's a couple of things to this. First of all, Taurus and Scorpio have a lot to do with order and chaos, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because yeah. Taurus and Scorpio have a lot to do with order and chaos, because Taurus is about building, step by step, building a foundation. Scorpio is about transformation, starting all over, letting things go. So it's very interesting that Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this, because this aspect between Mars and Neptune really pops out, especially because his Mars is in the first house, which means he really identifies with this Taurus energy of order and structure and foundation. But this Neptune in Scorpio can kind of explain that like transformational spiritual energy going on. And he's really, and again, this is an opposition. Mars opposite Neptune. It means this person is trying to find the balance between these two planets. What do these two planets mean? Mars represents a person's anger, their aggression, their spirit, like aggressive. Think like a very aggressive energy, like action, taking action, movement. Neptune represents spirituality, delusion, drugs, alcohol, getting lost in the spiritual stuff. And so it makes a lot of sense, because Jordan Peterson, he's struggled a lot with alcohol in his life. He also struggled with some kind of, was it opiates a couple years ago? Right? Especially with your body, right? Because these planets, Mars in the first house literally means, like if you have planets in the first house, it means like these planets have something to do with your body, right? And like Mars in the first house literally means like action, like taking action. And if it's Neptune, it means taking action with drugs, taking action with spirituality, taking action with God. And so he's trying to find the balance between these, right? He's trying to strike a balance, right? Because if he goes too much into Neptune, that transformational spiritual energy, he will lose himself, right? He can get too attached to God or whatever, or alcohol and addiction. But if he goes too much into his Mars, then he's too stubborn, too like not enough spiritual energy, not enough. Or you could just say Jordan Peterson, especially as a Taurus ascendant, he likes to stand tough. He likes to hold his ground. But this Neptune opposite of him is constantly watering him down. Spirituality is constantly like, spirituality and drugs are constantly like wrapping around him, like constantly like trying to get in there and make him spiritual or something. And I think it's incredibly interesting that the book he's about to release in November of this year, um, it's called Who Wrestle With God. That literally sounds like Mars opposite Neptune. I mean, that title perfectly captures the Mars Neptune aspect, right? Because what is Mars? It's action. And it's opposing Neptune, right? It's like you're wrestling with this. Like you're trying to like, how do I beat this Neptune? How do I make sense of God? How do I make sense of this spiritual world that is constantly eroding my island and my sense of stability as a Taurus, right? This Scorpio Neptune is constantly, this chaos is wearing down my order. How do I find order out of that? So that's Jordan Peterson's main thing that he really is trying to figure out, and it's so cool to see it in his chart. I do want to say, like, Mars opposite Neptune, when these come together, beware of taking on spiritual crusades, right? This is a crusader. This can also be an actor, right? Like this is someone who is right, because Mars is courage and anger, and like this is someone who is like spiritual justice, like fighting for spirituality, standing up for spirituality, spirituality with that is angry spirituality. God is getting angry. It's when, right, because it's like angry spirituality. It's like spirituality with a sharp tongue, or spirituality, especially like Jordan Peterson, right? Like because he's very talkative, right? This is spirituality with like that burns, spirituality with a hard edge, violent spirituality, right? So like, you can see Jordan Peterson kind of taking on this role as a moral crusader and kind of standing up for religion, and he kind of does it a little bit too much, right? Like he's kind of, it's almost like he's Batman or Superman, right? Like he's taking on like this role that is kind of like above him, like, right? Because Neptune again is delusion. And so if it's your Mars that's being touched by Neptune, it basically means like you think you're more powerful than you actually are. You think you're fighting for something that is more important than it actually is. Like you think you're fighting for something that is special, but you're deluded, right? Like this is like the little kid who thinks he's a superhero with the cape, but then he falls and trips over because he's not actually a superhero. So, but at the same time, this is someone who can really bring a lot of energy to the idea of a superhero, right? This is someone who can make the superhero possible at the same time. Again, like that wrestling with God, like that wrestling with this divine energy, this super energy.
This Mars Neptune opposition is also square to his Saturn in Aquarius. Mars in Taurus is square Saturn in Aquarius. Neptune in Scorpio is square Saturn in Aquarius. And this Saturn is kind of like his lifesaver, because if this aspect was on its own, it would kind of devolve into being drunk, being an alcoholic, right? More of that alcoholic issue, and being a crusader. But the Saturn is putting the brakes on this. Saturn is helping Jordan Peterson maintain structure and order, right? He's not going to go crazy and just start leading this crusade. Jordan Peterson is going to keep his wits about him, especially because Saturn is domicile in Aquarius and it's for the greater good. So this can mean a couple of things. First of all, this Mars-Neptune opposition This Saturn is going to make sure that if he does go on a crusade, it's going to be for the greater good. It's going to be for the betterment of humanity, that he's going to take responsibility in a very positive way. So even though he's kind of like this ridiculous crusader, it's still positive. It's still like there's a sense of maturity to it. And right, it's not like some random religious person holding up a sign. Like, this is someone who is gonna put it in its proper place and do good with being a crusader. You could also think about it as the opposite, as kind of like he's so immature as a crusader that some authority figure or some kind of authority in the background has to step in and say, okay, you need to stop doing this. Like, I feel like Saturn in the 10th house is kind of like, maybe that's why he lost his license, because it's like his psychology license, because it's like, you're fighting for this crusade that's kind of ridiculous, so we're gonna punish you for it. Because Saturn a lot of the time is restriction and punishment and taking responsibility or being held accountable for things. So it's like, if you do whatever it is that you do, you're gonna you're gonna pay for it. Saturn also kind of shows us like tasks that we take on that are too great for us, too much above us. So like, again, this plays even more. Like, if Jordan Peterson is going on a crusade, he's fighting for some political cause, some kind of spiritual thing. He fights for like the hardest spiritual thing. He tries to go after the hardest thing, because, or the most challenging problem. He doesn't just right, because if the Mars Neptune opposition was on its own, it would be like a crusade that's very easy or readily available, that's right in front of them. But Saturn is kind of this perfectionist quality where it's like, I'm going to choose the most important spiritual idea and fight for it. I'm going to fight for the worldly spiritual idea, that the idea that is more important than ever in the world. And so it's very like authority based. It's very much like Saturn is like creating some kind of like authority, or some kind of like, this is the most important, or this is going to be a real challenge. I'm really going to fight against this, and it's going to be brutal. It's going to be hard. I mean, Jordan Peterson even uses that word, like, oh, brutal. It's brutal. But again, like, even just looking at these aspects on their own, like Mars Saturn as a square on its own, it means someone who tends to do work that is very challenging. They work themselves too much. They can't stop working. They take on tasks that require too much physical effort on their part. And then Saturn Neptune plays even more into that alcoholism, because Saturn is reality and authority, and Neptune is spirituality and delusion. And so when these planets are a square, it's basically saying like, you're someone who really struggles with being in reality, or you're in reality too much. Like, how do I balance spirituality with reality? What do I do? Like, can I get drunk, or can I never get drunk at all? Especially in a T square, right? Because it makes a triangle, right? The opposition making a square to Saturn, it creates a triangle, right? The planet that's at the apex of the opposition is usually the planet that saves this person and grounds this person and is the balancing act. And what's really, really interesting, right? Because Aquarius is all about the future and the greater good and higher and like humanity, and Saturn is all about structure and order and discipline. I think it's incredibly fascinating that Jordan Peterson's solution to this wrestling with God is to make sacrifices, because he talks about this all the time, and it's very Saturn and Aquarius. It's very much about make your sacrifices. Pay up now so that you can do well later, and God will reward you. God will be happy with you. So I think it's very fascinating to see this T square really pop out in how he expresses things, especially because not only is Saturn grounding this Mars Neptune opposition, but it's making a trine to his Mercury, right? So more of that communication. It's also making a trine to his moon in Libra. And again, all of this Saturn in Aquarius, Mercury in Gemini, Moon in Libra, all of these signs are air signs. So Jordan Peterson is very thoughtful, and it's like a clever solution to this problem. Also, again, Jordan Peterson is very much about sacrifice and discipline and getting your routine in order. That's a very moon in the sixth house thing, because the sixth house rules health and routine and doing your work on a consistent basis, right? The sixth house is very much like a health working house. Like, do your work, take care of your health, have a structured routine, right? And then the second house is making money. So like, so it makes sense that Jordan Peterson talks a lot about like routine and nutrition, and he started this carnivore diet, and he created a life for himself that really seems to work and is really structured, because that Saturn is really boosting his moon and Mercury, but it's also grounding him with his Mars Neptune opposition. And Saturn is also in the 10th house in his chart. So it's kind of like his career. It's kind of like, right, because 10th house is reputation and career. And if you have Saturn there, you're someone who, like, you're kind of known for discipline and order. You're known for, again, it kind of matches that Taurus stuff, but you're known for someone who takes responsibility and that kind of thing.
Jordan Peterson, especially this year, he's had a lot of interesting aspects, transits over the years. So let me create two charts here. I'm going, okay, so hopefully you can understand this, but Jordan Peterson's chart is on the outside, and the chart currently right now is on the inside. So let's see. If we go to, I don't know, I might just take this out of the video. Honestly, I pretty much read Jordan Peterson's chart. There's just a few things I want to touch on. So recently, a couple days ago or a week ago, there was the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Oh, oops. Let's see. Yeah, there was the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and it's pretty fascinating because this conjunction took place almost exactly on Jordan Peterson's ascendant. So something to do with his body, with his place in the world, was very, very positive. Like, there's something revolutionary happening with Jordan Peterson right now with that Jupiter-Uranus aspect. So I don't know what, right? So like on the 24th, on that day, something happened that really changed how Jordan Peterson was oriented in the world, right? Like something very positive, like something suddenly positive is happening for him right now. And you could already see it, right? Like, I feel like just in like the last couple of months, Jordan Peterson, or even the past year, has really started to stand out. Like, he's really started to like move himself in a positive direction. And I think it's because for the past year, Jupiter has been in Taurus. It's just been moving along in Taurus. And so a lot of good things have been happening for him. And it's only going to get better because in the next year, Jupiter is going to move into Gemini and he's going to release his book. And, right, again, he has his Mercury in Gemini, his Sun in Gemini. That Mercury is like the foundation of his chart. It's like the main thing, right? Because he likes to communicate and talk. So a lot of good conversations are going to come up in the next year or so. And when he releases his book, let's see, he's going to release his book in November. Let me see. I think it was November 19th, right? So let's see, on November 19th, let's see, where's his ascendant? So his ascendant is right here. Yeah, Jupiter is going to be conjunct his sun. I mean, this book will probably be pretty amazing. Like, I'm not trying to beat Jordan Peterson up. I'm not trying, like, I'm pretty, like, I think there's a lot of good things about him. I think there's some negative things about him. I mean, overall, I think he's pretty okay. But just saying, like, this Jupiter, when he releases his book, it's going to be pretty positive, I think, because Jupiter is going to go over his Mercury. It's going to be about to go over his Sun once he releases his book. So lots of good stuff is going to happen for him next year, right? Because Jupiter is the planet of optimism and luck and expansion, like getting bigger, growing up. So it's great for him. Um, there was one thing as well. Uh, yeah, I don't know, but he has a lot of good placements, a lot of good transits coming up. Um, I feel like there was one thing that he should have watched out for. I feel like oh yeah, I feel like with Mars, let's see, there's something with Mars that I feel like he um I'm trying to like the chart keeps changing and it's so annoying. Um oh yeah. This was a transit that I feel like Jordan Peterson should be aware of. Um, um, yeah, I feel like okay. So so on July 15th, Mars and Uranus are going to come together and they're going to be conjunct his ascendant, and it's super close. It's only 3 degrees off. And Jupiter is also going to be transiting his Mercury, his natal Mercury. So I feel like on this day, um, something will happen like July 15th, something around there. Um, Something very positive or really negative could happen. Like some kind of accident could happen. Especially as a Taurus, right? Uranus is about shaking things up and it's sudden change. Taurus doesn't like change, right? Again, Jordan Peterson is all about order, right? Got to have that order, got to stay structured, you know? Um, right? When Uranus and Mars come together and they make a transit to his ascendant, some kind of accident could happen. I don't know, maybe this is a bad prediction, but Jordan Peterson should watch out for a possible accident happening.
Especially because this conjunction will happen exactly on the fixed star Algol, right? And that's honestly really spooky. Putting Jordan Peterson aside, I think someone is going to get beheaded on this day because Algol is all about being beheaded and it's about the head being detached from the body. And so if Mars is violence, Uranus is sudden change, right? Someone's going to suddenly lose their head. And Jordan Peterson should be careful because his ascendant is close to this. So Joe Rogan should be careful. I mean, you should just be careful if your ascendant is close to this, especially because the ascendant represents your physical body. So again, I'm not trying to like create some kind of fear or paranoia or whatever. This is what the astrology is saying. So you just got to be careful. And especially because Jordan Peterson is very political, he's very outspoken. There's a lot of political tension. Some kind of accident could happen that he should just be careful of. So, yeah.
Sometime around July, um, right? From July to the end of July, he should be careful in July because some kind of accident. Well, probably early July, I would say he should beware. Um, so yeah, that's Jordan Peterson's chart, and I feel like that was all of the stuff that I thought was um let me put it back. That was all of the stuff that I found the most interesting about Jordan Peterson. Again, that Mercury really stands out. It's very cool. Yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you later.